The film begins with Steve and Fish watching a movie while waiting for the rest of the group. They are criminals who plan to steal a briefcase containing valuable data, which could earn them millions. During the robbery, one of the victims begs them not to take the briefcase. She says that its contents are worth an enormous amount, more money than they could spend in 2 lifetimes. Irritated by the woman's desperation, Candy decides to kill her, even though Hurt is against the attitude. Xenia, the leader of the group, orders everyone to focus on the mission. After carrying out the robbery, they meet up with Steve and Fish. Upon noticing the blood on Candy's hands, Fish questions what happened. Because the agreement was not to hurt anyone, the group remains silent until the discussion is interrupted when a survivor appears, shooting at them. Hurt and Candy quickly kill him, then store the briefcase and continue the escape. On the way, Xenia tells everyone to get rid of their cell phones to avoid tracking. She explains that they need to stay hidden until they can contact the identity forger. Luckily, she knows a perfect place and asks Steve to keep going. In the morning, they arrive at a farm covered in snow. Noticing Fish in silence, Steve asks if she is okay, and she says yes and likes his concern. Xenia warns that they need to wait for the forger and asks them to go inside. Meanwhile, Candy finds a beer in the snow and decides to take it. After tasting the drink, Candy throws the can away because of the bad taste, making Xenia reprimand her for the attitude. Shortly afterward, the can is grabbed by some branches that move on their own, revealing that the group is not as alone as they imagined. Steve gives the car keys to Hurt, who tries to look at the briefcase, but is stopped by Scott, Xenia's husband. Then Steve asks Fish why they are still at the farm. She explains that they need to wait for the new passports to escape the police. He decides to walk away, but Xenia asks him not to go alone. Even though he ignores the warning, she ends up accompanying him. Meanwhile, the rest of the group finds a woman named Enria and asks if she is the forger. She denies it and tells them to leave. Candy becomes irritated by the answer and shoots the woman. Fish questions her attitude, but Candy ignores her and enters the barn with Hurt in search of Enria. Upon hearing the shot, Steve returns to Xenia, who acts strangely and points her gun at the woods. She warns that they need to get out of there, but he does not believe her and walks away. At that moment, a creature appears behind her, and when Steve turns around again, Xenia disappears. Then Candy finds the wounded woman and tries to kill her, but Hurt stops her and decides to help her. Enrita guarantees that she will not call the police and asks if Fish is a doctor. She replies that she only studied medicine, making Enrita question what she does now. Meanwhile, Steve is attacked by creatures, and his screams are heard by the group. Fish tries to help him, but Scott stops her, while the woman says that she could not do anything for him. The creatures begin to approach the farm, while Xenia is almost killed, but ends up being saved by 2 unknown men. In the house, Candy decides to go after her, but Henrietta warns that she will be killed by the monsters. Before she can leave, the creatures appear carrying Steve's remains. The group tries to attack them, but the shots do not work. Then Henrietta faces the monsters with a blade, and after killing one of them, the rest retreat. Fish is shaken when she sees Steve's torn-apart body. Later, Henrietta explains that they only bought time and hands a weapon to Fish, who refuses it. Upon discovering that Steve was her brother, she says that Fish will have to avenge him. Hurt asks what those creatures are, and the woman explains that they are guardians, but avoids details. He suggests escaping by car, but she explains that they will not be able to escape and that they need to wait. Fish asks what will happen at night and discovers that the monsters will come after them even more furious. Shortly afterward, the creatures attack the farm again. The group tries to defend itself, but they keep coming in large numbers, forcing the woman to take them through a passage into the tunnels. During the escape, some monsters are killed, but a tremor causes part of the path to collapse. After the collapse, Hurt, Candy, and Scott manage to find an exit from the tunnels, but are soon chased by more creatures. Unable to escape, they end up surrounded and have no options for escape. They end up being saved at the last moment by a local resistance group. Meanwhile, Fish and Henrietta survive their injuries and hide when they hear the creatures approaching. To avoid being found, the woman covers her face with mud, explaining that it helps camouflage them. Meanwhile, the rest of the group continues facing the monsters until Xenia appears accompanied by the two men who saved her. She asks about Fish, but discovers that she was unable to escape. During the conversation, it is revealed that the men are Henrietta's brothers. Jonas wants to return to look for her, but Mike believes she is already dead and does not want to continue the search. He says that he will take the survivors back and leaves Jonas free to go alone if he wants to look for her. Jonas accepts and asks for a tracker to help him in the search, so a woman named Jamie offers to accompany him. Meanwhile, Xenia also wants to go after Fish, but Mike stops her, saying that their mother needs to talk to her. Later, Fish and Henrietta stop at a stream to clean themselves. Upon noticing her sadness, the woman says that she understands her pain because she also lost a brother. Henrietta says that her family was destroyed after that, but Fish remains silent. Fish tries to find out what is happening, but she avoids answering and asks that they continue. Meanwhile, Mike and the survivors head to the shelter in search of safety. On the way, Dutton moves away to investigate something, while Carl tries to talk with Hurt and Candy, who do not understand his words. Then, Dutton returns and warns Mike about the danger. He takes the others to safety, while Mike stays to face the threat and receives help from more survivors. Later, Scott, Hurt, and Candy go with Carl, who orders men to protect the rear. Along the way, they find a newly created creature and kill it. A woman compares the monsters to rabbits because of how quickly they multiply. Hurt asks again what those creatures are, and Carl only replies that they are guardians. Then, he warns that his house is nearby and that his mother wants to meet them. After some time, the survivors manage to reach the shelter, where they are received by the rest of the group. Elsewhere, Jonas and Jamie return to the farm and find what remains of Steve. During a conversation between the two, Jonas asks if there is a different way to get new people, but Jamie says that they have always followed that same method. Meanwhile, Fish continues following Henrietta until she notices something and they quickly crouch down. Fish is surprised by her agility, especially because of the injuries she carries. When she tries to approach, the woman reacts aggressively and grabs her neck, but soon realizes the mistake and lets her go, apologizing for what happened. At the survivor's house, the group is received by Naja, a woman everyone calls Mother. Worried, she asks about her daughter Henrietta, but one of the survivors says that she died while saving those people. Even shaken, Naja says that if it was for that reason, then it was not a death in vain. Carl informs her that Jonas and Jamie went to investigate the situation. Hurt asks again what is happening, and Naja explains that they ended up trapped in the middle of an old feud between them and the monsters. Not understanding, Hurt asks why they simply do not leave. The question irritates some residents, who respond that they will not abandon their land because of some weeds. Hurt says that he understands their position, but explains that his group is only passing through. Naja replies that leaving makes no sense, because this is the only safe place for miles. Even so, Candy says that they will risk it, but ends up being stopped. Then, Naja calls her daughter Odie and asks her to show the house to the group. Odie shows the resident's house and takes Hurt and Candy to a room. During the conversation, Candy says that she needs to find a way to escape from there. Hurt reveals that he still has the car keys and suggests that they escape during the night. By the end of the conversation, it becomes clear that the two have a relationship. Meanwhile, Jonas and Jamie find Henrietta accompanied by Fish and celebrate that she is alive. Fish is taken at gunpoint and asks where they are going. Jamie replies that they are going home, while Jonas comments that dinner is almost ready. Not understanding, Fish asks what is special about dinner, but the two only smile. Meanwhile, Naja prepares the house for an important dinner and asks her children to get everything ready. In another room, Hurt and Candy finish their intimacy, and she goes to the bathroom. On the way, Candy hears some men questioning whether Naja's plan will really work. Worried about her delay, Hurt goes out looking for her. At that moment, Odie secretly enters the room and surprises him. With superhuman strength, she immobilizes him and reveals her true form by transforming into a creature. When she tries to kill him, Hurt manages to react and kills her with an object. Meanwhile, Candy secretly enters another place on the property and finds the dinner table. In the center, a strange drawing catches her attention. Carl then appears and explains that everything began with them. Confused, Candy asks what they are. Carl reveals that they are the Guardians and that the moon awakens the beast within them, but only when they allow it. Other residents explain that the prisoners can be used for reproduction, increasing the family, or simply serve as food. Soon after, Candy is knocked out, while Carl orders them to search for Hurt. On the other hand, Hurt cleans himself and goes down the stairs armed, managing to leave the house without being seen. Outside, he finds another creature and manages to kill it with several shots, but ends up running out of ammunition. Soon after, more monsters appear, and he enters into a confrontation with a woman in her human form. Hurt tries to use objects around him to defend himself, but she shows much greater strength and resistance. In a moment of desperation, he manages to hit the creature's eye and kills her, but ends up distracted when the others decide to intervene. Hurt is then knocked out. Later, he wakes up tied beside Candy and the other members of the family. Naya begins to explain that they have been in that garden since ancient times. Not understanding what she means, Hurt is interrupted when Fish arrives accompanied by Henrietta. Naya is happy to see her daughter, but soon reprimands her for the fright she caused and orders her to prepare for dinner. Naya asks Jamie to say a prayer before dinner begins. After that, Xenia and Scott reappear and call Naya mother, surprising Fish. She begins to be reprimanded for having betrayed the family, but shows no concern and only asks to be transformed. Naya tells her to be quiet, saying that this will happen at the right moment. Xenia insists, stating that her time is running out, but Naya says that she should be grateful for everything she received and ends the subject. Candy finds their behavior strange and asks what the family's connection is with the plant creatures. Then, Naja decides to tell the story. She explains that many years ago, there was a man named Chester, a human rural worker who was being prepared to be transformed. According to her, he was a good person and at that time, the Guardians lived in harmony with them. Everything changed when Chester met Sylvian, a Guardian. The two became involved and gave origin to something that should not exist, causing an imbalance. Naya reveals that it was at that moment that the conflict began, and that those responsible needed to be killed. Mike says that he killed Chester, but Sylvian is still alive and seeks revenge. Candy asks what happened to the baby, and they explain that the child cast a curse upon them. Hurt asks if the conflict cannot simply end, but Naya replies that the situation is much more complicated. Mike then reveals that, the day after tomorrow, everything will change, awakening Candy's curiosity. They explain that the sun and the moon will align during an eclipse, causing the two creatures to have the same level of power. Excited, they say that they will finally be able to eliminate their enemies. Naja interrupts the celebration and says that first they need the main course. Soon after, Jonas arrives carrying a pot and reveals that inside it is a man's head. Horrified, Hurt, Candy, and the others watch as the family members begin to transform. During dinner, they witness the brutality of the creatures while they feed. The situation is interrupted when Naja approaches Fish and leaves her unconscious. Later, Hurt, Candy, and the others wake up trapped in a cell with another person kept as a hostage. Hurt tries to calm them down, saying that they may still be able to escape. The woman asks where they would go and says that it would make no difference whether they fled or stayed there, because everything is still hell. According to her, they are now only cattle waiting for slaughter. Meanwhile, Xenia talks with Scott and blames herself for what she did. She believes that Naja will never grant the transformation she wants. Scott then asks whether eternal life is really worth it and suggests that there is another alternative. Later, Jonas meets with other members of the group and finds Enrita, who shows concern about what is happening. He asks her to accompany them, because the plan against Naja is about to begin. The group decides to rebel because they no longer accept following the rules imposed by her. Even insecure, Enrita ends up hearing Jonas's guarantee that everything will work. Hidden, Mike follows the conversation and discovers their plans. Mike quickly calls Naja to show what he discovered, causing her to confront Enrita. She tries to explain that it was only a conversation, but Naja realizes that something is wrong and remains suspicious. As time passes, Hurt and Fish begin to lose hope of escaping, while Candy remains determined to fight. In the morning, Naja gathers her children and gives a speech to prepare them for the confrontation. Motivated, they arm themselves to face the creatures, which soon arrive at the place. The battle begins, but the group ends up being dominated by the number of enemies and needs to retreat inside the farm. While the prisoners watch the confrontation, the hostage says that she hopes they all die. The battle becomes even more intense, with Sylvian and her creatures advancing against the farm. Enrita tries to motivate the siblings, saying that they need to resist a little longer. However, the group begins to suffer losses, until Naja warns that the eclipse is about to happen. When the environment becomes completely dark, Henrietta and her siblings go through the transformation and assume their creature forms. With both sides finally in equal condition, the confrontation begins again, and the Guardians begin to be defeated. Even suffering some losses, they keep fighting. Meanwhile, Zinnia and Scott reach the cells. Zinnia apologizes for what she did and admits that she believed she could keep everyone united forever, but realized she was wrong. Candy interrupts the conversation and demands that she free them. After releasing them, Zinnia tells Fish that she can hate her afterward, but first she needs to get out of there. Furious, Fish attacks her and says that this will be the last time they see each other. The group leaves the place, while Zinnia breaks down in tears. Zinnia tries to convince the group that there is a way to leave that place, but Fish questions her intentions after everything that happened. Henrietta appears during the conversation and recognizes that the doubt makes sense. Zinnia then says that the time has come to change and that they can choose to do the right thing. Before leaving, Fish says goodbye to Henrietta, and the closeness between the two almost results in a kiss, but the moment is interrupted when someone calls for her. When they leave, they realize that the confrontation is still happening. The other hostage desperately runs the wrong way, even after being warned, and ends up found by Sylvian and her creatures, who kill her. While the battle continues, Henrietta calls Jonas to return to combat. On the other side, Hurt, Candy, and the other criminals continue looking for the stream to escape, but Hurt ends up captured by a creature. However, the eclipse begins to end, causing Naja and the others to lose their monstrous forms and return to normal. Sylvian takes advantage of the moment and finds Naja, killing her quickly before going after the others. Meanwhile, the group spreads gasoline across the property and prepares to put its plan into action. During the attack, some try to hide to survive, but end up found and killed by the Guardians. Meanwhile, Henrietta and Jonas continue facing Sylvian and her children, until Zinnia appears and reveals her connection to her, calling her mother. She asks Sylvian to stop the massacre, but her mother ignores the request and orders them to keep attacking. Carl is quickly killed, while Mike suffers over Naja's loss. At another point, Hurt, Candy, and Fish continue looking for a way to escape. On the way, Hurt is attacked by a creature and ends up wounded, but manages to kill it. Upon realizing that the place is full of monsters, they try to decide what to do. Meanwhile, Henrietta gathers the survivors and prepares a plan to finish off the Guardians. She explains that they need to defeat them at that moment, or everything will have been in vain. Zinnia and Scott offer to attract the creatures, allowing the others to move away. The monsters invade the shed, and the two try to resist, but end up gravely wounded. Before dying, they activate the plan and cause an explosion that kills Sylvian and her creatures. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the group of criminals manages to flee. However, along the way, they are found by Enrita and her siblings. Now as leader, she frees Hurt and Candy and asks her siblings to prepare new ground. Fish asks what will happen to them, and Enrita replies that they will keep fighting. When asked why, she admits that she does not know how to explain and simply says goodbye. Fish is shaken by her departure, while Hurt and Candy continue traveling. Later, Hurt asks them to wait for Fish, but Candy asks if he still has the car keys. When he confirms that he does, she shoots him in the back and takes the keys. When Fish arrives and asks what happened, Candy points the gun at her and orders her to go to the vehicle. There, they open the briefcase, and Fish notices a gun on the object. Candy celebrates that she will keep the money, but soon several shots are heard. Then, it is revealed that Fish killed Candy and kept the briefcase. This is how we end the story.